Hello, welcome to my channel. Thank you so much for joining me. Today I'm going to talk about all the books that I read in February. So this month I started 4 books, but I only actually ended up finishing 3 of them because I did have the DNF. But I'm going to talk about all 4 books in this video, and I'm going to explain why I chose to DNF the book that I DNF'd. If you're new here, 3 books a month is pretty average for me, so I was really happy with how much I was able to read. And out of the books I did finish, I did enjoy all of them, so I'm really happy with that. So without further ado, let's get into the books that I read in February. Now the first book that I read, well, I didn't finish reading it, it was actually my DNF, is The Wedding People by Alison S. Batch. This was a book that I was so excited to read. I'd heard really good things, and I believe it won the Goodreads Prize for Fiction last year. So I had really high expectations and I thought I'd really like it based on the concept. It's basically about a woman who decides that she wants to end her life, and she decides to go to a really fancy hotel/inn, and that's where she's planning on doing it. But when she gets there, she realises that the whole hotel is actually booked out for a multi-million-dollar wedding, and every other guest that's at the hotel is there for that wedding. And she ends up bumping into the bride, and the bride finds out about what she's going to do because she just outright says it, and the bride is like, no, you can't do that, this is my wedding, I don't want you to spoil my big weekend. And that's basically where it goes. That's kind of the concept, is that she kind of ends up getting lured into joining the bridal party and kind of becomes friends with the bride. And this book is advertised as like a laugh out loud comedy, and I just didn't find it that funny. It also is really depressing. I mean, obviously you go in knowing about the suicide, and that's mentioned like very, very early on, that this woman is like severely depressed and wants to take her life. And I obviously knew that that was going to be an aspect of the book, but because it was described as a laugh out loud comedy, I just assumed that maybe it would be a little bit slapstick and silly and over the top to kind of compensate for that. But that side of the book is still really, really depressing. And I just didn't really like any of the characters, and I didn't really like the plot, and there was just some of the subtropes in it that I just really didn't like. I just didn't find it as funny as I thought it was going to be. It is a literary fiction, but like I said, it is advertised to be really funny and entertaining, and I just found it really boring and quite depressing, and I just wasn't really engaged with it. Because I'm such a mood reader, if I'm not in the mood to read a certain book, I find it really difficult to get through, and I will just DNF it. And for this book, I was trying so hard. I actually got to 280 pages, and I only had about 100 pages left, but I just couldn't do it. I was thinking, well, either I could really just binge the rest of this book and try to read 100 pages in like a day or 2 days and then just be done with it, or I can just move on now, cut my losses, DNF it, and just leave it, because I just was not interested. When I DNF'd it, I did actually speak to a couple of people who had finished it, so I still got to find out what happened at the end, and I'm still glad I DNF'd it. I don't feel like anything at the end was really going to redeem it for me, because at that point I just didn't really like the characters, I didn't really like the plot, and I just wasn't engaged anymore with it. But I have heard still amazing reviews about this book. I would just say don't go in expecting a laugh out loud comedy. I think that's the problem I had there. I really thought it was going to be so funny, and it was a little bit funny, and there were some scenes that were quite silly and slapstick, which I did appreciate, but there just wasn't enough of it for me, and I really thought that was the road we were going to go down. Kind of like, if you've ever read Dial A for Aunties, that was kind of the vibe I was expecting, where in Dial A for Aunties, it's basically about the main character who accidentally kills her Tinder date, and then her aunties help her to cover up the body, and there's loads of just like silliness. It's a really ridiculous book, and you really have to let yourself go with it, and it's really over the top. And I kind of thought that would be the case for this book, and I was really prepared for that sort of book, and it just wasn't. It was like very literary fiction, very heavy, some really, really heavy topics explored as well, so massive trigger warnings for things like pregnancy loss and pet loss as well, if that's something that's going to upset you, because I just was not expecting. I mean, obviously, you know, she wants to kill herself, so you know she must have been through a lot of bad things, but yeah, it was quite traumatizing, some of it, and it was just a lot heavier than I was expecting, and I just didn't get on with it. But I would still say, if you have your eye on it and if you already have a copy, I would still read it, because I have heard a lot of people do really like it, but I would say maybe go in with the expectation that it's not a barrel of laughs, it's not a comedy. It's very much a literary fiction and it kind of has some comedic elements. I also don't know if I just didn't get the sense of humour. I mean, I like dry comedy and I like something that's sarcastic, but I think for me, because the characters were all just so unlikable, I just didn't find it funny. The main character I found super unlikable and I didn't like her as a person, so I just didn't really root for her or root for the story at all. So I did end up DNFing that one at 280 pages, but let's get into the books that I did manage to finish, because the rest of the reading month was actually quite good. It was just that first book that was a bit of a slump for me, but the rest of the books I read were all really good. The next book I read was The Thursday Murder Club by Richard Osman. This was a book that I went in with really low expectations, and maybe that is why I preferred it to The Wedding People, because I think when you go into something with too high expectations, you're just bound to not meet them because it's just impossible. Whereas this book was the opposite. I went in with really low expectations because so many people I know in my personal life had either read this and really didn't like it, or had DNF'd it and not even managed to finish it because they just didn't get on with it. But then I heard someone talk about it on YouTube and she described it as, if you like Only Murders in the Building, you might like this. It's a little bit silly, it's very charming, and it's kind of just a cozy murder mystery. And that's exactly what I got from it. I wouldn't say it was necessarily my favourite ever murder mystery, but I did really enjoy it and I did like the characters and find them endearing. I think towards the end there are a few plot points that were a bit sketchy, but also I was just happy to look over them because I just didn't really care. This book follows a group of elderly people living in a retirement village that meet up every Thursday to look over cold cases and see if they can crack what happened and who was the killer. And they do this every Thursday, but then one week someone they actually know in real life ends up getting murdered and they think, wow, maybe we can actually solve this one for real because it's a live case. Some of it is a little bit silly, but I did just find it endearing. The way that it's kind of structured is you will have these chapters where I believe they are in third person, but they will kind of be from the perspective of one of the characters and you'll kind of get an insight into their life and what they're doing. And then every now and then you'll get a diary entry, which is in first person from Joyce. And Joyce is the newest recruit to the Thursday Murder Club. And she will basically talk you through everything from her perspective and she'll kind of summarise what happened and where they are with everything. And I did really like the fact that you kind of got all these different perspectives of the different characters, because obviously you had all the four main people, but then you'd also get perspectives of the police officers, the people who also could be suspects, and other people that are involved in the story. And I did really like it. It definitely is quite a nice, like, cozy mystery for this time of year. There were a couple of heavier topics towards the end and it was quite moving at times, but it's not the sort of mystery that's like very thrillery. It's very much a cozy mystery rather than high stakes thriller, page turner, really scary, gore, graphic, any of that. It's very much like cozy mystery, elderly people. I did find it interesting learning about all the different characters and their backstories and all the issues happening in their personal lives. I did feel like the range of characters was really interesting to read about and I did really like that aspect of the book. I ended up giving the book a 4-star. I did really like it, but it wasn't anything that was like 4.5 or 5-star worthy in my opinion, because it didn't completely blow my mind, but I did still really enjoy it and I just had a fun time. And I think especially coming off The Wedding People where I just was hating it, I was really pleasantly surprised to just have a book that was easy to read, enjoyable and entertaining. I don't know if I'd have read it at a different time if it had had a slightly lower rating, but I think I was just happy to read something that was fun and entertaining and I did really like it. I was also very happy to read this book as well because it meant that I was able to tick a book off of my reading 10 books of my physical TBR challenge for the year, because this was a book I already had on my shelf. So I was really glad to just get it read and I'm really glad that I actually did enjoy it in the end, because I just had such low expectations and I was so ready to go in and just DNF it just to get it off my shelf, but I did really like it in the end and I gave it a 4-star. The next book I read was The Do-Over by Lynn Painter. This is a YA rom-com and it basically follows a girl called Emily and she wakes up on Valentine's Day and she decides that she's going to have the best Valentine's ever. She has all these plans with her boyfriend of like these things that she wants to complete off her to-do list, and everything just goes wrong that day. And then she kind of finishes the day thinking, what a disaster day. But then she wakes up the next morning and it's still February 14th. And she's like, what's happening, and it's basically a time loop scenario. This is such a cheesy but fun book, and I think it's perfect to read in February. I'm so glad I was able to read it. It's been on my TBR for a while, I've had it on my Kindle for a while, and I ended up seeing someone review it because they read it at this time of year as well, and as soon as I saw the review and knew it was surrounding Valentine's Day, I was like, oh my god, I need to try and read this in February because it was just perfect. And yeah, I absolutely loved it. If you've read Better Than the Movies by Lynn Painter, I think you'll really like this one as well because it's very much a similar sense of just like fun vibes, very flirty, very cute, and yeah, just like the perfect YA rom-com. I did really like the characters, and I really liked the time loop situation as well. It was actually really entertaining, especially when she does it obviously so many times that she's just getting so sick and she really starts to push her luck with it. I'm a big fan of Lynn Painter's YA novels, and I definitely want to read more stuff by her because I really like Better Than the Movies, and I also really like this. I ended up giving it a 4-star, so I did really enjoy it. Again, it wasn't as good as Better Than the Movies, so I didn't end up giving it any higher than 4, but I did really like it and it was just a fun time. For me, when I'm rating books, I usually just base it off of, was it fun? Was it entertaining? Did I like the characters? Did I just enjoy myself when reading? And that's for me is like if something's getting 4-star and above. For things that get like 4.5 or 5 stars is usually because I really just love it and I really connect with the characters, or there's a concept in it that I just absolutely adore. But yeah, to get a 4-star to me basically means I really had a fun time reading it. I enjoyed it. It was a very good read and I feel like I just really took a lot from it, and it's a book that I'll come back and think on. But yeah, so I really like this book as well. The book is A Little Bit Grumpy Sunshine, which is really sweet if you like that sort of thing. And yeah, it was very interesting. When I first heard about the concept and the fact that it's a time loop situation and that she has a boyfriend, but I was pretty sure that she was going to be paired up with someone who wasn't her boyfriend, I was like, how does that work? Because how is she going to get someone to like fall for her in a day? Because obviously everyone else is just experiencing the day for the first time. But I really liked that side of the book, and I really liked them as a couple. I thought they were really well matched and I thought it was really sweet. And just some of the stuff they do, there's this kind of section where it's like a bit of a Ferris Bueller's Day Off section, and because she's just like, screw it, I'm just going to do whatever I want today, and I just loved that chapter. I thought it was like so fun, and yeah, I would say this book is very fast paced and very quick to read, kind of like a lot of YA novels. It was just a really easy read and it's very plot driven, so it's very much like a good book to read if you just want a pick-me-up and a bit of a binge. And I definitely recommend it if you're looking for a YA romance because this was a really fun one. And then the final book I read in February was Between the World and Me by Ta-Nehisi Coates. This is a book that's been on my physical TBR for literally years. I think I bought it when I was at university, and for whatever reason I've just never picked it up. I've heard a lot of good things about it, so I was like, you know what, I'm going to give it a read, and I really enjoyed it. It's a letter written by Ta-Nehisi Coates to his son, and it's all about being black in America. And it's basically split into 3 sections. I found the first part of the book a little bit hard to get into at first, and I ended up switching to the audiobook, and I preferred that experience so much more. So if you have access to the audiobook, I definitely recommend listening to it because it's actually read by the author himself, and I feel like it just paints such a better picture of the words he's saying when you can actually hear them spoken. However, for me, it was really in part 2 that I just really fell in love with this book. It really was very thought-provoking and just really fascinating to learn about, and really heartbreaking as well because there was just a lot of incidences that he spoke about and personal incidences as well, which were really interesting to read about but also very shocking. I think this is more for people that live in the United States because I think race is very different in every single country, and as much as I think some of what he was talking about does still relate to the UK and Europe, there's actually a section in the book where he ends up going to Paris and he talks about race there, and it's a very different situation, and I do just agree with that. I think it is very different depending on what country you are. I think in the United States in particular, race is just a huge topic, and especially with systemic racism involving the police, I think it is a massive issue. I'm not saying it's not an issue in the UK, I still think it is, but I think with the US's gun laws, it really just adds another element to it. And I think it does just make the United States a completely different country in that sense when it comes to law and the police force. But yeah, I ended up giving this a 4-star as well. I did find it really moving and just extremely thought-provoking. Like I said, some of the things that he just spoke about were just things that I'd never even considered, and it really did make me feel ignorant about myself and the way that I view things, because there was just a lot of things that, like, as a white person, I just never really considered would be a thing. It does make me really want to look into some non-fiction books that are around the similar topic but based more in the UK. I've heard really good things about Akala's book, so I definitely want to check that out, because I've heard that that talks a lot about race, especially in terms of colonialism and the British Empire. So I really do want to check that out, because like I said, I found this book really fascinating. I just maybe would prefer something similar that's more towards a British lens. I think another reason it took me a little while to get into is just because it's non-fiction. As much as it is a memoir, it's a little bit denser to get into than some of the other memoirs that I read, especially because I usually read celebrity memoirs, which are very easy to read and very simplified, and they don't necessarily talk about big political issues like this book did. This book is also very like train of thought, which I found a little bit hard to wrap my head around at first, because it very much is like spoken, but that's why I think it was so much easier when I got into the audiobook, because it is a book that is very train of thought spoken rather than necessarily a book that's best to be read. So I definitely recommend, if you have access to listen to the audiobook, I would. I personally was able to listen to the audiobook through Spotify, so if you have a Spotify account, it should be on there for you, or check your local library for an audiobook as well, because I think that did just really enhance the experience a lot more for me. And yeah, those are the 3 books that I finished in February, including a DNF that I didn't quite finish. I really hope you like this video, and I hope you're able to get some recommendations. I recommend all the books that I finished this month. I really enjoyed all of them. It just depends what you're in the mood for. I definitely am hoping for some 4.5 and 5-star reads in March. It's actually my birthday month in March. I'm having a little bit of time off around my birthday, and I'm really hoping I can get some reading done. And I'm also really excited for the new Hunger Games book. I've actually pre-ordered it on my Kindle, so I'll be getting that on release day, which I've never done before. I've never had a pre-order on a book before, so I'm really excited for that. So I'm hoping my March wrap-up will be really exciting and hopefully have some really highly rated books. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope I catch you on my next one. If you have any recommendations for books or have any thoughts, leave your comments down below. And if you like this video, feel free to give it a like and feel free to subscribe to this channel. But yeah, I hope you like this video, and I'll hopefully see you in my next one. Bye!